Hello everybody, welcome back to day 2 of the activation series. My name is Sara Oblak Speicher and I'm so excited that we get to do this. It has been a long time in the making. For those of you who are new, welcome to my circle. I would love to note who you are, so if you want to introduce yourself, say hello. If you're catching a replay, let me know as well. Also, I'm curious, this is a free series. Anybody can access it here on Facebook directly live. You can also catch a replay on YouTube and via LinkedIn. Essentially, it will be closed for public general consumption, so to speak. But I also want to invite you to check out the opt-in page in case you're not registered for it yet, so that you can also receive a workbook. Yesterday, when we were talking about immersion and identity activation, I know we were kind of off a slow start, and I was reflecting on it today. I was like, oh my goodness, I do a lot of speaking and I felt so rusty yesterday, and all these negative self-talk came up, and it was fun. It was definitely a fun conversation to have had over my morning coffee, but I figured, you know what, once we warmed up, it got the conversation started to flow, although I should say my transmission started to flow a little bit more fluidly, which only leads me to believe and set an intention that with each passing day, this is just going to be more excellent, and the content itself, it's going to be richer, and we're going to be going deeper with each passing day. And I'm also saying this because it has also been my own experience when I sign up for some things. The day one, you're usually all excited. By the day 2, you're like, I'll catch a replay. By the day 3, it's like, oh, shit, I forgot I scheduled something else, and whatever it is, right? No hard feelings. We are all humans. But I do want to throw in this incentive to invite you to really set this time for yourself, because this is what it is. It's time for yourself. You're not here because of me. You're not here to please somebody, to make somebody proud, to get a brownie points or whatever. You're here because you said yes to something deeper. You're here because something on the opt-in page that you're reading it through, maybe it was the words, maybe it was the energy, maybe it was the combination of all of it, something nudged you. And I received earlier today a beautiful message from somebody who felt that energy immediately, and that's what it is all about. At one point, before we go into today's reinvention and innovation mastery, I do want to express that at one point, some of us do start acknowledging that frequency, what we start feeling more than what we're thinking. In a recent interview that I was listening to, I think it was Glennon Doyle was talking to either Michelle Obama or Alex on Call Her Daddy podcast, and she was saying, coming back into my body, and this was a body decision, not a mind decision. This is really the distinction that I think it's such a beautiful segue into today's topic. Feeling something in the body. I'm a human design generator, 3-5 sacral authority. I feel things, I respond to things, but this is my personal design. So before we even dive in, I want to invite you, in case you haven't yet, do some research, get curious about what yours might be. There's so many different tools, there's so many different ways to continuously learn about who we are, how we respond, what works for us naturally, what works, how we operate, almost like creating our own personal blueprint in a way. And this is just one of the tools that once I learned about it, it's like, oh yeah, it does not define me, but it definitely allows me to be more conscious of decisions, and it allows me to use it when it comes down to, is it a heart-centered decision, or is it a pressurized decision, as I call it, the external pressures, or is it an intellectual decision? And sometimes they all lead to the same output, the same results. Sometimes they lead in total opposites. Not saying one is wrong and the other one is right, but just putting it out there, offering you the discernment for you to utilize. All right, so now that we got this out of the way, shall we dive into the reinvention and innovation mastery? Initially, when I was putting this together, I was actually thinking about all the people that I've had the honor to work with. And one part of my work that I don't publicly talk about very much is ghostwriting. And in addition to mentoring people, creating or consulting, strategically consulting small companies, medium-sized companies, as well as solopreneurs, ghostwriting has been something that I really have been diving into over the past 2 years or so. And under that umbrella, I have not only written several very technical articles for my clients, but also I've had the honor of rewriting narratives, whether it's resumes, whether it's biographies, whether it's brand stories for high-level executives. I think we're around 700 plus at this point. So when I was thinking about how to bring into the conversation this reinvention, I really reflected on this work when a client comes and I sit down with them and get the material to work with. It's not necessarily reinvention at the most obvious sense of the word that we know, which means, taking things apart and starting anew, starting from scratch. But it is more so a innovation, taking what already is there and seeing it in a new way, reimagining it, rewriting it. That itself played a huge part in the story that I want to share with you as a thread throughout today's session, because as I mentioned yesterday, the season that I'm in, I feel called to share my own personal stories, and as an example, weave in some stories from the work that I get to do with my clients, and then also give practical examples, give strategic actionable tools and so on, and strategies that are more or less frameworks that you can apply immediately. But it's like a combination of them all, and some is pre-planned and some is just a stream of consciousness. But this innovation really, the first time I really started to contemplate on it was actually one of the master classes that I have attended as a part of the audience. I believe it was about a year ago or even further back. And it really, really stuck with me, because oftentimes when we're talking about, starting a new chapter, transitioning in life, transitioning in careers, there's this notion that, oh my gosh, I have to start all over. I have to forget about who I was. I have to break everything down and I have to start anew. And just that idea, for so many of us who are high achievers, who have, for the lack of a better term, lived the dreams that so many of others are holding, the idea of having to tear everything down is just overwhelming. And we're like, no, I don't necessarily want to dismiss everything that I have worked so hard for. I don't want to just walk away from everything. So this idea of innovation, I was like, that's the word. And I also said yesterday, that one of the intentions for this series is perhaps to encourage you, maybe to give you, to offer you permission in case you haven't found it yet within yourself. Maybe it's to inspire you, maybe it's to motivate you, maybe it's to light up a fire underneath your seat, or maybe it's to offer a vocabulary. And innovation was the word that was lacking in my vocabulary in this context. And once it's landed, I was like, okay, got it. New level activated, unlocked, loaded, let's go. So today I want to talk to you about reinvention and innovation mastery. And before I dive into my story, I want to plant a seed. And I want to ask you offer the first mindset shift. This is part of the structured programming here. your next identity already lives within you, and it's just waiting for your permission. What does that even mean? Each and every one of you is going to have a different interpretation of it. How it reflected in my life, here's where the story time begins. So get comfortable. It's going to be an awesome story that I have not shared publicly. And I'm going to tell you, I tried. It was not for the lack of trying. I was just not in the space, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual space. I was not ready to share it yet. So today you get to hear it first. I've shared snippets through my writing, but not the whole story. So I'm excited and I'm a little bit nervous, but I promise it's going to be worthwhile. So as you might know, I am in Slovenia now. My family, we uprooted our lives in New York and we moved to Slovenia about 2 years ago. The whole process, actually, when I think about it, it didn't start 2 years ago. It didn't start 3 years ago. It started with the first calling that I had to return in 2018. I spoke about it yesterday, and all the ordeals of how I actually mustered up the courage to book those flights to go home for a couple of months and to just start the healing process, which eventually became this emerging process, rebirth, if you will. After the pandemic, when the world shut down, one of the biggest shifts that I have received was also the expansion of my own capacity to welcome something new in my life. Looking back now, it makes complete sense. When I was standing in those shoes, it didn't. So what happened was I decided to start writing my book, my memoir. And I had this, high achiever in me, had the super high flying goals of having to make it into a bestseller, and it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be flying on the shelves because it was such a relatable story, not just lineage of women in my family, but also story of survival, story of abuse and violence, a story of geopolitical natures that was very, very relevant in 2020, 2021, 2022. And again, here we are, still relevant again. All shared through the lens of a athlete, an immigrant, a new mom, a wife, a family, making a living, trying to navigate the life pretty much on our own without the typical support system that you would think of when you think about having a support system. And I realized that many families nowadays are exactly what we were, a nuclear family, doing life on our own without any support system. And it's very much different than how many of us were raised. We were raised, at least for my part, I can say, in a community, cousins, aunts, uncles, friends, family, teammates, classmates. It was a community. There was always somebody somewhere for whatever you needed. Well, my husband and I and our 2 little ones, we didn't have that. In New York, awesome neighbors, but that was pretty much it. When you needed something, I didn't have, after all these years, I did not have one phone number that I could put on as an emergency contact to get the kids should something happen to myself or my husband. Think about that, right? So where was I going with that? Yes, so I decided to sit down and write a book. As most of the things, when it comes to me, typical frameworks don't work. So I tried to squeeze myself, compartmentalize myself in the typical writing process, sticking to a pre-made structure and the schedule and so on and so forth. It didn't work. I couldn't put one word on the paper, which for a writer that writes very naturally, it didn't make any sense. Then I had a chance to work with a mentor of mine whose specialty is helping people speak things into his existence. And she has this amazing gift of asking just the right questions, asking them in just the right way, or asking them a little bit differently. And all of a sudden it was like a whole box was opened, all the different planes have aligned, and the memories started to stream through, the connections were made. She was able to catch things and name things and organize things. So within a year, literally from Christmas one year to Christmas the next year, I had, from our initial conversation to having a physical book in my hands. It did not become a bestseller. It was not even published. What I realized was simply a cathartic practice that I did not know I needed. And it was a way for me to release and let go so much of what I had been holding within, including, and that was another big part of my healing process. As an athlete, I have been through many questionable circumstances that, looking back now, I was like, yeah, the Me Too movement really triggered me and really spoke to me and really brought to light some of the memories that I shoved aside, and allowed me to see myself in a total different role than I had assigned to myself and carried with so much shame and guilt for so many years. So putting everything on those pages, including that history of mine, was like, oh, okay, I can now breathe. Because in my mind, not only was now everything that I've been holding so closely to my heart, some of the darkest secrets, some of the public battles, so to speak, they were on paper. They were now there. I did not have to hold them anymore. I also had a piece of my legacy, so to speak, to pass on to the kids. And actually they do have their own books, and whenever they're ready, if they're ever ready, if they ever want to do it, they can go and read those. If they want to burn down, I don't care. It's going to be their choice. But at least that part, that aspect was, I want to say, taken care of. Now I could sleep. Fast forward, the space that opened up. You know how often we really struggle with spaciousness and with emptiness and this peace and quiet, especially when we're just so used to go, do, achieve, accomplish, celebrate, okay, great, next. Also something I was talking about yesterday. Sure enough, all these empty spaces, now I had the time to think about all the things that were not the way I wanted them to be, all the things that I would have liked to have experienced, to have done, to have accomplished, and I wasn't doing it. One thing led to another. At one point I was like, yeah, we gotta go. Something needs to change. This is not it anymore. A big part of it, I admit, again, lesson learned, and I want to offer this to you in case you're in a similar situation. People that you surround yourself with and environments you are in tremendously impact your perception of the world around you, your perception of those around you, and even your own role in this world. The main thing of this story will be, I'll talk to you about it when we talk about relationships and sacred relationships on our last day. So let's put an enteric post-it in it for now. But all I'm gonna say is, gladly, luckily, by some sort of miracle and divine intervention, I did realize, and thanks to my husband's persistence and incredibly strong and tender loving, I realized that, yeah, what I thought were the answers were just ego, and it was just trying to keep up with the Joneses within my circles, and it was not really them cheering on me because it would be in my best interest, but it was I know now it was the best that they knew, it was the best that they had to offer, but it was also very myopic and very one-sided. And they tried to peg me into the holes where they had pegged themselves, and they were projecting their own experiences onto me. And like I said, luckily I was able to recognize it in time and get out. All of that to say, and here's now the awesome juicy part about reinvention and innovation. The identity that I found within myself, I also had to learn how to give myself permission to say, okay, great. We have outstayed our welcome in the States. I had outstayed my welcome in the States. I can't explain it. I can't justify it. Anything I might put on paper might make sense to me, but it won't make sense to anybody else, but I have to trust it. I have to trust this gut feeling of mine. I have to trust my innate knowing. I had to trust myself, and I had to know and muster all the courage to take a stand when the calling came to make a decision. This is it, we're moving. And I remember it clearly because it was my grandma's birthday, and I was standing in the bathroom at my parents' house. On the phone was my husband, and he's like, well, I don't know, what are we doing? I said, okay, we're doing it. We're doing it. Now, before that moment came, let's backtrack a few weeks earlier. I was still in the process of potentially having to find a place for just the girls and I, and we were looking for potential places here in Slovenia. And I came across this space that I initially saw in 2019, and I fell in love with it. It was not available then. It was out, sent out for rent. I was like, oh, okay, so it's not meant to be. We had our home in New York. Moving was not in the cards, fine, but something about it was just so, you know, when you find a space and you walk in and it consumes you and you feel it. That's what it was in 2019. So the girls and I are now looking potentially for places for us to call our new home, to make a home for ourselves. And there it was. This space became available, and the realtor was like, well, right now, today is not available to be seen, but we can schedule an appointment. I was like, no, I've seen it before. Like, well, what do you mean? I haven't seen it yet, and I'm the realtor for the whole building. I was like, yeah, I did in 2019, and yes, put me down. We're on. The girls, we were able to finally walk through it, and it was like, this is it. So as we're going through that timeline, my husband and I are also on our own timeline of trying to figure out, is this really the route that we want to take? And he knew that it wasn't. I still had those little whispers of, no, it's not quite, but my ego was still very determined to speak my truth, so to speak, to walk my path. And we finally, that day when we were on the call then, and it was like, okay, well, we have to make a decision. Are we putting down the offer? Are we doing this? And we're like, yeah, we're doing this. In that moment, everything became real. The oh, I wish became working on it. And I think that was the biggest shift in that particular moment, when I moved from oh, I wish to working on it, and working on it intentionally. I didn't say one day, I didn't say, yeah, we will, but it was a continuing tense, present tense, working on it every single day, every single moment, starting right now until the thing is done. I had no idea what the whole thing would entail. It took us, this could be like a Netflix series in its own for the next year and a half that it took us to come full circle. But the thing that moved inside of me, that allowed me to continue down this journey when I get to all the no's and so on and so forth, was this I want to say identity that I had activated, and tangibility, is that even a word? Tangibility? If not, I'm just making it up right now and I'm claiming it, of knowing what this space is gonna look like. Taking pictures, taking videos, putting it on a vision board, having the kids evening conversations. Oh, this room we could do this, and this room we could do this, and this is gonna be my room, and this is how it's gonna be decorated. And every single day going through those images, feeling the space, walking through in my mind, waking up in the morning, seeing through the windows, knowing what the view is gonna be, seeing myself walking the dogs down the stairs, through the front doors, to the back. Everything was very, very vivid, very tangible. And that's what allowed me to really anchor this vision and ultimately start working towards it, became a match for it. Now, I know this sounds very poetic and woo-woo and very much out there, but I wish I could tell you that there is some secret formula of how you can do it. I don't have that secret formula, but what I can tell you is that if it's meant to be, it will be. And sometimes it is very intentional, and sometimes it's just the life guiding you. And I'm gonna get to that second part of life simply guiding you and you're just surrendering to it. But for now, let's stick with the intentionality of this story and this goal setting and advancing every single step, every single day, day in and day out towards the goal. So the moment we said yes, I phoned the a realtor, like, okay, this is it. This is okay, we're gonna put your name down. And then we didn't hear from them. And then one Friday afternoon, the phone finally rang. And it's like, yeah, the other offers, the people who put the other offers didn't pick up the phone. So I called you, are you still interested? It's like, heck yeah. It's like, okay, great. I will send over the documents and this is the information that we need from you. Shit, this was a huge piece of information that I had no idea what it was. I had no access to it, and I needed to call a governmental office to obtain that information. On a Friday afternoon, if you're in Slovenia, you know that the governmental office is pretty much closed at 1 p.m. if you're lucky. It's like, oh, how are we gonna make this happen? Well, the stars realigned. I was able to get to that information within an hour or so, put it in paper, send it back to the realtor. And that was it. Then it was time for, when we returned to the States, like, okay, now the work begins. Because, you know, on the surface, this huge transition was super simple. What do you need? You need to sell the home in New York. We already have the one waiting here. We need to pack, and my husband and I need to align our businesses and our careers, and it's going to be awesome. So 4 things. We already knew what the kids' schooling is going to be. Super easy, great. If you have ever attempted anything like that, then you know that each one of those 4 tabs opens into about 2,000 bullet points and some bullet points, and they have their own timelines, and everything is like a domino effect. Each change affects everything else, and it's like, oh. But for some reason, I really excelled in those puzzles as a strategist, as a visionary, as a space placeholder, so to speak. It's like, ooh, I was in my element. So yeah, the first offer on the house came within 2 weeks. Like, oh shit, this is way too fast. We're not ready yet. Because we were looking at a timeline from, let's say, end of August to very ambitiously end of December. Very ambitiously. But here's where things get really juicy. Almost 20 years with the company, my husband's company said, sorry, you can't work remotely. So now all of a sudden, he had to make a decision. What is he gonna do? Is he gonna trust this crazy idea that his wife had of uprooting everybody and start anew on a whole different continent? Or is he gonna say, you know what, no thanks, I'm good, have fun? Or what, right? And he chose to trust my vision. He chose to keep us as a family and do this together as a family. Which meant we, on top of everything, had to figure out, okay, what's the career gonna look like? What are we gonna do? His professional resume got polished. And you know what I said earlier, that we rewrite stories, reimagine the possibilities, and show people that they don't have to break everything down that they had built, but they can innovate, see things from a different perspective, see things in a different light. That's exactly how his face lit up when he saw that first draft. I'll never forget him come down the stairs holding this piece of paper, beaming. And he's like, it's gonna take me a while to grow into this. But seeing a grown man who has built incredible career see a whole different layer of how the world saw him beyond the typical office in and out, right? That filled me with such joy and such excitement for him that it gave us additional wings that we needed at that moment to really keep pushing through. Because as we were figuring out what his career is going to look like, what are even the possibilities of transitioning to European side, we were also trying to figure out the timelines about the house sale, and that timeline did not work with what we had said for the space here in Slovenia. And the banks, I think we call about 40 in Europe. No, 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 no. I honestly started to panic. And here's where another tool that I want to offer to you. Instead of journaling doesn't work for me. What works for me is, I want to say, self-hypnosis, so to speak, is hearing the currency of my own voice and walking myself through, talking myself through things. So what I ended up doing is not only taking a hell lot of walks, but also creating a ton of recordings when I would just talk to myself, and you could hear, if you were to have access to those recordings, if you had to go back, you would hear the beginning, my voice was very shaky. You could hear the tears through the voice. You could hear the nervousness. You could hear the doubt. But the more that I kept talking and talking and talking, and just like, it was almost like the Matrix, you know, when the things, the numbers, the letters, they all just start to appear. That's what my experience was, kind of like an out-of-body experience, talking myself through it. And within, sometimes it was 2 minutes, sometimes it was 20 minutes, sometimes it was an hour and a half. Eventually emerging on the other side with clarity, with direction, with newfound capacity to do all of that things. So ultimately everything aligned. We were able to find a seller. Even that one was an interesting one, because if you haven't experienced the way real estate works in Slovenia is very different than the way it works in United States. In United States, you're expected to either empty the house entirely or at least remove all the personal artifacts. So when a potential buyer walks through the space, they can envision themselves and they're not bothered by seeing anything of your life in there. But with 2 little kids, with 2 dogs and a senior cat, and you know, the moving and the boxes and everything else, you can imagine how frustrated it started to become, to having to maintain house clean for a moment's notice, walk through multiple times a day, having to pack everything and get out. Eventually I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this, we're done. So this couple walks through and we give them space. Through every room they go in, we kind of remove ourselves out, and then I overhear them, you know, talking about some possibilities and how things were just not the layout that they were looking for. And I think I was an architect, at least in one of my previous lives. So I was like, hey, do you mind, you know, since this is our house, I know every wall, I know every wire, every outlet, every piece of infrastructure, I know exactly where things are. Have you considered this? You could do this, you could move this here, you could. All of a sudden the light bulb went on, and like, yeah, those were our buyers because, you know, I did things our own way that day. Finally, the day came when we had everything packed, headed to the airport, the kids and I, and the dogs, because my husband was still finishing up his commitments in the States, and knowing that the divine grace extended him flexibility with both finishing the old position and starting a new one. It just one flew into the other very, very smoothly. So when he joined us about a month and a half later, it was really the most serendipitous day. The kids and I were staying in an RV for about a month and a half because the renting situation fell through a few days before our flights in February, and that was the only thing that I could think of. We were parked at my parents' house, and there were a couple of nights when the kids would come in and then start to cry, like, "Mommy, I just want to go home and you sold everything." I can't tell you the stabbing feeling that came through when they said that. And I was like, "Hey, you remember what we put on our vision board last year?" And the little one's like, "Yeah, RV adventure through Europe." It's like, "See, RV adventure through Europe." And she goes, "That's not what I had in mind." Well, next time you'll be a little bit more specific with the universe, what you would like. Anyway, my husband landed at around 11 a.m. At around 1 p.m. we signed the lease to buy agreement with the sellers. At around 3 p.m. we moved in. And then every single day, every single week, it was still the guessing game. Is the paperwork gonna work out? Is the finances, are they gonna work out? Are all the legalities gonna work out? Deadlines were moved and pushed beyond any limit that I could possibly imagine. You know, usually when you sign a contract, that's what it is. And by some grace of, I don't know what intervention, things continuously get pushed until we finally had it all settled almost a year later. And it was the space, that very same space that I saw in 2019 and fell in love with, and I felt it. So all of that to say, what I had learned in that process, not just me, but also with my husband, and it was such a beautiful example, not only a reflection of the work or a result of all the work that I had been doing with my clients, but also now a model for continuous work, is that there was not a lot of room for us to really reinvent, meaning taking a sledgehammer and knocking everything down, but innovating our relationship, reimagining the possible, rewriting our own personal narratives to rewrite our own story as a family, as a couple, as a unit, before even as a family. Innovating the way we continue our life. You know, what have we imagined initially, what that had become, what has now opened up as a new possibility, and what are the opportunities that we get to create and say yes to. Innovating even my own business and my husband's career. The year leading up to our move, even my own business, like every single physical aspect of my life was screaming, "This is it. You have overstayed your welcome. Get out." My health started to fall apart. My business started to fall apart. Like nothing worked anymore. Things that I used to do with my left hand in the middle of the night with my eyes closed didn't work anymore. And you can imagine the frustration of that. But the poetry in all of that is also, we arrived on a Thursday with the girls. On a Monday, I started with my new business, with a new clientele, with a new line of projects. That has been a most remarkable experience. And it has been almost like a light switch of, okay, everything fell into place exactly as it needed to, because we never stopped fighting for it. We never stopped pushing for it. We never stopped moving forward. We never stopped holding that vision and working in unison together for that common goal. I can't tell you how important that piece itself was on the journey. Holding the tangible vision and moving, taking action every single day. And here's another nugget for those of us who are high achievers and who are very much attached to our need to produce results on a daily basis. I would offer that taking action sometimes simply means taking a rest and trusting that things on a whole different plane are getting rearranged on your behalf to match your new destination, your new vision. And for those of you who are spiritual, I also will have you know that in my natal chart, it says will not return to Europe according to a couple of readings. I was like, yeah, here's my stubbornness. You tell me I can't do something, I'm gonna say, watch me. You know, one of those things, even if it's written in the stars, doesn't mean it's written in the stone, and doesn't mean that you don't have the agency over it. So this is that part of the story about intentional innovation. You picking and choosing what you want to say, the identity that already lives inside of you, giving it permission to emerge, and sometimes just like giving a birth, it is freaking painful. It's tearing you apart. And it's simply the process that it's unavoidable. And when I was telling you, you know, that reinvention and burning things down, it doesn't have to be the only way. What I do want to offer in the same breath is that some things, however, do need to be released. In my case, it was writing the book when I could release incredible amount of things from my mind, from my space, energetic space. It was willingness to release myself or my husband from the marriage that allows us to really reimagine and come back together and became even stronger, more connected. It was this willingness to release what we knew as a home to welcome something much more aligned, something much more congruent, something much more expansive, and I want to say energetically nourishing. The environment here, it took a while to acclimate. Of course, it's a cultural shock for most, and I lived through it once when I made the other way, the commute the other way, so to speak. So I also knew what that feels like, and I was able to offer that support as well. So speaking of the other way, right? So we were talking about the intentionality about this, and you choosing to embody this identity that you had activated, and you choosing to create the space where your immersion and what do you want to say, rebirth will be supported. However, some of you might be in a state, in a season in your life when you are not required to push through intentionally, but you are more in a, hey, I'm just going with the flow. So let me tell you that part. I have been there too. In 2003, when I was happily at home, newly retired from basketball, freshman in Slovenian college, thinking I'm just gonna start a whole new life, no more worrying about showing up for practices, it's gonna be awesome. And then one evening I received an email and it said, hey, we're a college here, university, Division I university in New York. Would you be interested in coming to play for us? And I was like, no. Because let me tell you, my high school was literally across the street from where I used to live. My elementary school was across the street from where I used to live. My practices were across the street from where I used to live. Going to college 20 miles away seemed like a colossal waste of my time commuting back and forth. Now you want me to go to New York? Are you kidding me? Absolutely no. Life had different ideas. Divine intervention was taking a form of my mom, who just happened to walk in my room that moment, and it's like, what is that puzzled look on your face? And I explained this ordeal to her as I was typing N-O on a keyboard, and she's like, well, why don't you go give it a try? You can always come back if you don't like it. Famous last words. It's like, okay, fine, I'll go give it a try. I kid you not when I tell you that every single step that I could possibly mess up in the process, I did. I showed up to Poland to meet my coach for the first time and do the kind of like a scrimmage practice. I showed up without practicing gear because I misread and misinterpreted the email. I just simply thought we were going to go for dinner, and I think I was wearing some very fancy outfit when she came to pick me up with a cab, and she's like, where are you going? I was like, well, we're going to dinner. She's like, yeah, after practice. I was like, practice? What kind of practice? I barely spoke any English, so you can imagine TOEFL tests. I still don't know by grace of what entity I passed those tests. Then when I got accepted, I misinterpreted the email and I figured, oh, I'll just start as a freshman again. I didn't have to bother with any exams anymore. I didn't have to bother by going to any of the classes anymore. And the vacation came early, so to speak. Well, at least until my next email that read, hey, we are expecting your transcripts in a couple of weeks. Sorry, you're expecting what in a couple of weeks? And I still remember like it was yesterday when I was sitting at my desk staring at piles of books and notes and photocopied notes from more dedicated classmates of mine who were gracious enough to allow me to make copies. And I was trying to figure out, how am I going to learn all of that within the next 3 weeks? I think it was, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 classes, whole year. I have no idea. I did it the first time around. If you're not familiar with the Slovenian system, you usually have 3 chances. And strategically, a lot of students, what they do is they will space things out. They will pace themselves. They will take 3 early summer. They will take 3 midsummer, and they will take 3 in the fall. But no, I had all of them at the same time, 1 chance. Somehow I passed it. So yeah, that's how I ended up in New York, downtown Brooklyn to be more precise, at around 1:30 in the morning, looking around all the security guards because it was still post 9/11 high alert. And I was like, what the heck have I done? Where am I? So that became my home for the next, I want to say, the plan was for 4 months, for 4 years, but I stayed for almost 20. But what I wanted to offer to you in this part of the story is that, as opposed to being very intentional in returning, I was literally going with the flow the first time around. And all of that is to say there's no right or wrong way. Life ultimately is going to present to you what you're meant to be presented with. And if it's meant for you, it will happen. If it's not meant, it won't happen. But I also want to offer you this, that just because there's a resistance and just because it feels like you have to push and tear down the walls and move through them and do extremely hard things and deal with incredible amount of resistance and everything going sideways, you will know the difference between stopping and saying, okay, maybe that's not for me, and this deep knowing that fire just wouldn't let you go and it wouldn't let you just walk away and you keep insisting, you keep persisting, you will feel it if you give yourself permission for this version of you to emerge. And you can feel the passion rising from me right now, because I can see every single day how many of us live our lives without that fire, because we have smoldered it entirely by making sure everybody else is taken care of, by making sure everybody else around us is happy, by making sure we please and appease and tick off all the boxes and meet all the expectations, especially athletes. That was another beautiful conversation that I was listening with Simone Biles when she had issues at the Tokyo Olympics with the twisties. Those were just a result of her really disassociating from all the trauma and all the pressure and trying to compartmentalize it and push it aside. And I guarantee you, most of us, especially women, are masters at that. At one point, things will come out, things will explode. And in my situation, it was autoimmune disorder, it was business completely flatlining, and it was my marriage on a chopping block, because it was the only way that I knew how to grasp for air, how to call for help, how to get the attention, and how to actually start the conversations and making decisions that needed to be had, that needed to be made. Difficult conversations, uncomfortable conversations, hard decisions that are not something like, oh, are we gonna have pineapples today on pizza, or we're just gonna have a regular pizza, but conversations that change trajectory of not just our lives but our kids' lives. And all along the way, when we were holding on to that vision, one thing that allowed me to keep standing in my knowing was belief that reinvention and innovation are not for them being whoever them are in your life. You know who them are in your life. It is for you. It is for you, and it won't make sense. It doesn't have to make sense. And even today, if I ask my husband, and people ask this all the time, how is he adjusting to Slovenian life? You know, Slovenians, we are very, very proud of our country. We usually very excited to see foreigners who enjoy it, whether it's tourists and especially the ones who move here. It's a very interesting thing to observe. And yes, I get a lot of questions with this spark in their eyes, you know, waiting for a very positive answer. Like, oh my gosh, yes, he absolutely loves it. It's not that simple. It's not that easy for somebody who had his own vision and never imagined himself anywhere else but in New York. So just the fact that he trusted me and my knowing to the point where he's like, okay, we can do this. You know, that I can't even verbalize that. I can't even express what it means to me. And in the meantime, it still takes time. There are still moments when I ask him, like, so it's been 2 years now, what are you feeling? And I can still feel this, you know, push and pull, just like I had experienced it in New York, when I knew, like, okay, you know, part of it is awesome, and a part of it is just like, something's missing. But the thing is that oftentimes, especially where we're making those massive leaps, I also want to leave you with that for some, it doesn't matter where you are. For some, it doesn't matter what's going on, and you're going to find, you know, you're one of those people who can be anywhere and you're going to be okay. Some of us are very sensitive to our environments, and some of us are very sensitive, not to the point of being unable to thrive because of some intellectual preferences or so, but energetically, it feels like we are a plant who has been uprooted, or we are a fish that has been taken out of water, right? You can't train a fish to live outside the water, no matter how hard you try. And for those of us, I do want to offer to you that you know it within yourself. If you quiet everything down and if you give yourself permission for that little voice and that little sensation inside your body, you will feel it. You will be guided. And I implore you, trust that. Trust it. You have been trained not to, but be the rebel. Trust it. Okay? So this is my soapbox for today. Whew. A lot more energetic than yesterday, I have to say. Completely different energy. And again, have to trust that whoever is receiving this on the other side of the screen, that it's exactly what you came here to get. Now, homework time, okay? So I mentioned the workbook yesterday. I mentioned it at the beginning of this conversation too. If you haven't yet, you gotta register on the link somewhere around this video. And when you do so, you will receive a PDF workbook that you can download and fill out. There are gonna be 3 journaling questions. You don't have to sit down and journal. I don't sit down and journal, but I offer them in contemplation. For clear reasons, I'm not gonna read them out loud right now, because the incentive is, after all, for you to actually go and download it. And it's not my intention to get you now into some inner circle on my mailing list so that I can spam you and email you. Not at all. But I do want to establish the bridge, the connection, and a way for you to continue the conversation and a way for me to get in touch with you, should that be needed. And hopefully for the next 5 days that we have left, we get to the point when maybe there is something in this work, maybe something in this energy, maybe there's something in this approach that speaks to you. Maybe you're out in space when you're like, I need some of that magic. I need some of that strategic genius. I need some of that sacred space. I need some of that insight. I need some of those experiences. I need some of that whipping, whatever it is that you need. I need some of the love and support and gentleness and somebody believing in me and seeing me for who I am, possibly for my potential, so to speak, not where I am. Take whatever you need, all of the above. If you are in the space and it will become clear over the next few days, let's continue the conversation. And I will also share ways to work together throughout the rest of the series here, because let's be honest, we are here for business purposes after all. Yes, all of this is a gift to you from me, but it is also the highest level of service that I can offer. It's not in a free masterclass series that is designed for more of a general public, but it's really a sacred space that you and I co-create together, and there's a couple of ways to do so, and I will walk you through it. I'll present it to you so that you can then yourself make a decision whether this is something that you seek, something that you want to experience or not. I'm not here to push, I'm not here to convince, I'm simply here to convey the information based on which you can then make your own decision. I do want to offer, however, in addition to the journaling questions that are waiting for you in the workbook, there's also 3 practical actions to bring this transmission to a completion. I invite you to write the next chapter mission statement. And how does that work? How does it look like? That's entirely up to you. You can go to town with the whole essay, with the whole movie script. It can be a one-liner, it can be a collage, whatever works for you, but I invite you to actually put it down on some sort of tangible form for you. And then I'm gonna challenge you to start releasing things from your life as well, to create that space, to create yourself the capacity that you will need to welcome all that goodness. So I'm going to challenge you by creating a stop doing list for yourself. Not adding more, but things that you're going to be stopped doing. And maybe it's physical doing, maybe it's mental doing, maybe it's energetic doing, maybe it's emotional doing. You have the answers, my dear. You know exactly what needs to come to that list, and just be brave and put it down, okay? And then last but not least, this is a little bit more tricky for some of you who are perhaps a little bit more private individuals, or perhaps you don't feel comfortable sharing, but this is not time for remaining in comfort zone. This is time to step way beyond the zone of comfort. So I would like to challenge you to share the behind the scenes post about the internal shifts that are already underway. Again, where do you post? That's entirely your decision. What are you writing about? It's entirely your decision. Who are you sharing it with? It's entirely your decision. The point here is that you claim it publicly. It triggers a whole different set of motions, just like it was for me when I stopped saying, oh, I wish, but I switched to, oh, on it, doing it, working on it right now. It will shift something within you as well, because now that you're claiming it publicly, it gets a whole different blueprint, energetic blueprint for you to work with and operate with and step into and hold. All right, so this is all for today. Tomorrow we will get back together and we're going to be talking more about the embodiment, and we're going to be talking about turning your multidimensional truth into a message and presence that lends. And yes, presence, message, some of that is, again, for public consumption, so to speak, and some is simply for you, for your internal being, for all of your versions that you're holding, for all of your timelines to realign, and for all of your, so to call, you know, one of my mentors, she used to say, me, we, they, for the whole staff, to help you navigate through it. All right. So with that, I want to say thank you for joining me today, whether you are on live or you are catching the recording. Let me know, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a beautiful evening.